The sun was setting over Evelyn Carter's quiet suburban street as she pulled into her driveway, feeling the satisfying weight of a day well spent at the local community center. She had been mentoring at-risk youth, kids who needed someone to remind them that their dreams mattered, no matter how much the world tried to crush them. Her house, a modest but proud home she'd rebuilt from the ground up, felt like a symbol of that same resilience. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, a safe haven carved out of years of hard work and discipline. She stepped out of her SUV, her keys jangling in her hand, when something caught her eye down the street. A cluster of teenagers leaned against a lamppost, their laughter loud and jagged, as though they were sharing a joke at someone else's expense. Evelyn knew the look, boredom mixed with just enough recklessness to tip into trouble. Her instincts flickered, but she shook her head. Not tonight. Inside, the house welcomed her with familiar silence. Evelyn sat down her bag, allowing herself a moment to breathe, to feel the day's tension melt away. But the peace didn't last. A sudden, deafening crash shattered it like glass. Her heart lurched as she rushed to the window, and what she saw hit her like a punch to the gut. Her front yard was a battlefield. Spray-painted slurs dripped across her walls, their neon colors almost mocking in the warm evening light. The flowers she'd spent weekends planting were flattened, stomped into the dirt. Shards of glass glinted from her smashed windows, and in the middle of it all stood the teens from earlier, armed with spray cans, bricks, and a dangerous sense of entitlement. Evelyn stepped outside, her face calm but her body taut like a coiled spring. Years of special forces training kicked in as she assessed the scene. No yelling, no panic, just quiet control. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady but sharp. "Why would you do this?" The group hesitated, shifting uneasily, but one boy, the ringleader, stepped forward with a smirk that practically begged to be wiped off his face. "Because people like you don't belong here." Evelyn stared at him, her jaw tightening. The words were a slap, but she didn't flinch. Before she could respond, the boy hurled a brick at her house, shattering another window. His friends followed suit, laughing as they added more destruction to their canvas of hate. The sound of approaching sirens finally sent them scattering into the night. Evelyn stood in the wreckage, fists clenched. The damage to her home was bad, but it wasn't the bricks or graffiti that cut the deepest. It was the message, the venom behind their actions. It was a reminder of the world she thought she'd left behind, a world where she had to fight twice as hard just to exist. The police arrived minutes later, but their response was as broken as the glass on her porch. The officer in charge barely glanced at the graffiti before shrugging. "Kids being kids," he said, his tone casual, like he was talking about a harmless prank. "You should probably put up some cameras." Evelyn's breath caught. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice tight. "Look, ma'am," the officer continued, clearly annoyed. "What do you want us to do? Arrest a bunch of teenagers? You're better off letting it go." "Let it go?" Evelyn's voice cut through the air like a blade. "They vandalized my home. They threatened me." The officer sighed, glancing at his notepad like he was already bored. "What do you expect us to do, ma'am?" Evelyn stared at him, a storm brewing behind her steady gaze. She didn't argue. She didn't yell. She knew that look, the indifference, the dismissal. It wasn't the first time she'd faced it, and it wouldn't be the last. As the patrol car drove away, Evelyn stood on her porch, surveying the wreckage one more time. She took a deep breath, her mind already calculating. She wasn't the type to back down, not when everything she stood for was on the line. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Morning sunlight filled Evelyn's kitchen, but she barely noticed. She wasn't calling anyone for help or posting her frustrations online. That wasn't her way. Evelyn Carter believed in action, not words, and she wasn't about to let this attack go unanswered. In her garage, she opened a hidden compartment behind a wall panel. Inside was her past life, tactical gear, surveillance equipment, encrypted tech, all neatly arranged. Her military instincts were sharp as ever. If the system wouldn't defend her, she'd defend herself. Over the next few days, Evelyn transformed her home into a fortress. Hidden cameras, disguised as garden decorations, covered her property. She spent hours watching her feeds, tracking the teens who had vandalized her house. They spent their nights at a nearby park, bragging about their exploits and scheming their next target. But Evelyn found something far more disturbing. The kids weren't working alone. Their leader, Travis Garrison, was a middle-aged man whose hatred festered like an infection. He wasn't just enabling these teens. He was using them as pawns in a much bigger campaign of intimidation. One night, Evelyn followed Travis to a meeting at an abandoned warehouse, hidden in the shadows. She recorded as he laid out plans for escalating attacks, his voice a mix of venom and confidence, painting himself as a savior to his followers. Evelyn had seen men like him before, dangerous because they believed they were untouchable. Her footage was powerful evidence, but she knew it wouldn't be enough to force the police into action. She needed to turn public outrage into a weapon. Sitting at her laptop, Evelyn tapped into her skills. Within hours, she'd hacked into Travis' accounts, freezing his funds and exposing his donors. Then she leaked the meeting footage to the media. The fallout was immediate. News stations ran his name on repeat. Community leaders condemned him, and his followers started to scatter. But Travis wasn't the kind to back down. Enraged, he went on the offensive, posting an online video vowing revenge. That night, the retaliation came. A Molotov cocktail hit Evelyn's front door, flames licking at her home. But she'd prepared. Her reinforced doors and fire suppression system kicked in, extinguishing the fire before it could spread. Her cameras captured the attack, and within hours, the footage was viral. Public outrage grew louder, but Travis escalated further. In another video, his voice was steady and cold. "This isn't over," he said. "I'll finish what I started." Evelyn watched the video in silence, her expression unreadable. She wasn't afraid, but she knew this fight wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone like her, and it wasn't over yet. Evelyn Carter wasn't about to wait for Travis Garrison to make the next move. She'd learned long ago that hesitation only gave the enemy an advantage. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ending the cycle of hate before it consumed anyone else. Standing in her living room, she methodically suited up in her tactical gear. The weight of her past felt lighter now because she was putting it to good use. As night fell, she tracked Travis to a remote warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was the perfect hideout for a man like him, isolated, dilapidated, and crawling with loyal followers. Evelyn didn't hesitate. Using her military expertise, she approached the building silently, disabling cameras and slipping past guards like a shadow. Every movement was deliberate, every step calculated. Inside, Travis and his remaining crew were huddled around a table, their voices low but tense. Plans for their next act of terror were spread out in front of them, a chilling reminder of what they were capable of. Evelyn watched from the rafters, her sharp eyes tracking every move. She could have waited for law enforcement, but experience told her that justice wouldn't come unless she delivered it herself. One by one, she neutralized guards, leaving no room for error. By the time she dropped down into the center of the room, the group was cornered. Travis looked up, startled, but quickly masked his surprise with bravado. "Well, if it isn't the homeowner herself," he sneered, stepping forward with an air of false confidence. "You think you can scare me?" Evelyn didn't flinch. Her voice was calm, her gaze steady. "No, I'm here to stop you." The fight that followed was brutal. Travis underestimated her, mistaking her silence for weakness. He didn't see the years of training behind her controlled movements, the discipline in every strike. His followers tried to intervene, but Evelyn dismantled them with precision, ensuring no one escaped accountability. By the time she stood over Travis, his arrogance had crumbled, bloodied and breathless. He tried to muster a last shred of defiance, but Evelyn wasn't interested in his words. She calmly activated her communicator and delivered an anonymous tip to the police, her voice steady as she provided the location and details of his crimes. Minutes later, the sound of sirens pierced the air. Evelyn stepped back into the shadows, watching as the police stormed the warehouse. This time, they had no choice but to act. The evidence she provided was airtight, and the pressure from the public was impossible to ignore. As Travis was led away in handcuffs, he glanced back at Evelyn. For the first time, his bravado cracked, his eyes betraying fear and shame. Evelyn didn't gloat. Her victory wasn't about humiliation. It was about dismantling the hate he represented. In the days that followed, Evelyn's actions sparked a movement. Her courage inspired others in her community to stand against injustice, and her story became a symbol of resilience. The footage from the warehouse and her earlier encounters went viral, proving that one person's determination could turn the tide. Evelyn didn't seek recognition. She didn't want medals or headlines. For her, the victory was in knowing she protected her community and showed that even the most entrenched systems of hate could be challenged and defeated.